Hi, everyone. I'm Gabriella Lancaster, and
I'm Isabella Garay.
our sustainable development goal that we're presenting on and that we've been researching is affordable and clean energy, which is goal number 7. So what is it? What is our goal and what all does it entail? The United Nations sums up goal 7 as ensuring access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. So this would look like having more sustainably produced energy, such as solar, wind, and thermal energy. And not only is the goal to have more sustainable energy sources, but also to make all of these affordable to all people. And of course, another key aspect of this goal is for all of this to be achieved by 2030. In order to achieve this goal, lots of changes need to be made, such as investing in updated technology. So this would be like solar panels, wind turbines, electric vehicles, and then update infrastructure. So updating buildings or like adding green roofs to them. And in order to be able to produce and provide those energy sourcing we want to be able to produce and provide these energy sources in all developing countries, countries that aren't developing as much but are getting there, and then also like small islands as well. And while ensuring access to affordable and reliable and modern energy is the main goal, it's also kind of like an umbrella for a lot of other sub goals as well, such as promoting international cooperation to advocate for the access to clean energy, as well as research. And then also on an international level, encouraging the investment in energy infrastructure and clean energy technology. Another goal within this is to double the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency, and also to increase the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix significantly, which as of now is predominantly overruled by fossil fuels. And then some key issues encompassing our goal. So as you can see here, 759 people have a lack of access to electricity, and that's globally 1 out of every 10 people are without access to electricity, meaning that they probably don't have lights in their home, they don't have refrigerators to keep like food fresh or like safe to eat, they don't have heat for the winter, they don't have air conditioning for when it's hot. And due to this lack of access to electricity, I'm sure you can all imagine all the horrible things that can happen. Like imagine living in Boone and you don't have heat, or like where it's hot and you don't have air conditioning. It can be very dangerous. And out of those 759 million people, the majority of them are actually located in sub-Saharan Africa. And then energy is the main contributor to climate change and it's responsible for 60% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the whole world. So therefore, you can see why this is such an important goal, and like why striving for a world that relies on clean energy is so important and it's a priority. So if we can stop using fossil fuels, then this will have a major impact. And then many lack access to safe and clean cooking as well, and then indoor air pollution. So these next two kind of go together. So about 3 billion people use coal, charcoal, wood, and animal products for cooking and for heat inside of their homes. And these are not safe sources of energy to use inside at all. And when these are used, it leads to indoor air pollution, and that's been responsible for the deaths of about 4 million people each year. So that's like very crazy to think that from cooking in your home, because you don't have like safe energy to do so, 4 million people are dying from that every single year. And then the cost. So lastly, a lot of people argue, especially politically, like the cost of using renewable energy sources gets brought into things. But then because the demand for renewable energy sources is so high, it actually is becoming more affordable. And due to the increase of research that people have done, the government and businesses, and people have become a lot more educated on these energy sources, they're a lot more likely to invest in them and to use them. And how our SDG relates to others. So these are the 5 other SDGs. So for the first is decent work and economic growth. The second is industry innovation and infrastructure. Third is sustainable cities and communities. The fourth is responsible consumption and production. And the fifth is climate action.
So for goal 8, it is stated to promote inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. And in our relation to our SDG, using clean and affordable energy can create a green economy. This has the potential to create new job opportunities within the field of renewable energy, which is already predicted to grow to 38 million jobs in just a few years. And a green economy that utilizes clean and affordable energy will further open the job market. Accessibility to a wide job market will help the economics of country. Will help the will help the economies of countries grow while also positively impacting the environment. And researching articles showed how much money countries have been pouring into fossil fuels. It has been estimated that the US will spend 23 trillion on fossil fuels between 2010 to 2030. There's also the fear in certain countries that at the rate we are using fossil fuels, we will most likely run out quicker than expected. And targeting this issue now ensures the safety of having a backup plan before it is too late. And even major banks in America have also strived away from investing in coal projects due to environmental risk that it brings. And so by also implementing clean energy and increasing its popularity will allow for investments from the wealthy to be brought in. This can lead to other companies following in their path, either big or small, and can begin the process of affordable and clean energy being applied in our communities. And this will further help our economy become less reliant on coal. Okay, and so when researching this, we came across an Energy Resource Center website that we fact checked, and it pointed out statistics about energy and water. And here are the 3 that stuck out the most. So the US economy wastes 61 to 68% of the energy that flows through it. An example of this was the Lawrence Livermore National found in its 2012 annual report on a national energy waste that the US economy is 39% efficient and less efficient than ever before. The study factors in energy wasted in everything from electricity plants and cars to home appliances and furnaces. And it shows that the US gets a failing grade for efficiency. The second one was Americans spend 130 billion a year on wasted energy. A 2009 McKinsey company study found that American homes and businesses collectively pay for 130 billion worth of energy that powers standby appliances and heat that warms the air on the other side of the cracks in their walls. And lastly, the amount of energy wasted by 75,000 average American homes in a single year is equal to the waste that occurred in the 2010 BP oil spill. And it would cost 1 billion to reprofit all the homes in a small city and save the same amount of energy that would have been generated with roughly 50 million gallons of oil that leaked into the Gulf of Mexico, according to a study from Energy Savvy. Next is Goal 9, Industry, Innovation, and Infrastructure. Now, to change something, there needs to be innovation. And to think of the grand scheme of things, designing a building to become more energy efficient can have a huge impact. And one of the purposes of this goal is to promote a sustainable industrialization. There are many places in the world that don't even have access to energy, let alone clean energy, which we will touch on more throughout the presentation. But by being able to create in their spaces something safe and beneficial relates to both SDGs. Clean energy should be accessible to everyone. And it can start by building with the knowledge we have now about the negative effects industrialization has brought. And here is a map that showcases the country where there is little to no electricity. And it's shocking to look at it as a majority of us in the United States have access to electricity. And it just shows how necessary it is to really get accessible and affordable clean energy to those who really need it. Now, goal 11 is relating to sustainable communities and cities. Throughout the similarities of the SDGs, it's obvious they all connect, but this one ties in so clearly with goal 9 and our goal, goal 7. It again relates to building green, and by having access to clean and affordable energy, sustainable cities can be created. And cities have been constantly growing from the start. And when people think of cities, they often think of the busy, glamorous lifestyle that is often portrayed on TV shows, but they also think about the crowded spaces, the trash that litters the street, and the fact that there's a lack of stars due to light pollution being so prevalent in cities. And taking steps to ensure clean energy in these highly populated areas can start to undo the harm that has been created. Cities consume about 75% of the global primary energy. And if you look at New York as an example, it uses 11,000 megawatt hours of electricity on average each day. And 1 megawatt represents the amount needed to power 100 homes. So this goal is ultimately to create a sustainable community, and goal 7 aims to make electricity cleaner and less harmful to the environment. So goal 12 is all about responsible production and consumption. We live in a very capitalistic and materialistic world, but what we produce and buy has an effect on us. With the rise of fast fashion, goodwill is overflowing, and clothes unethically made make up a lot of room in our country. And while fast fashion is almost impossible to stop, companies that are able to apply renewable electricity in their factories can have a huge impact. Even taking steps to create an ethical work environment can be improved with clean and affordable energy. And even remarketing products and modifying this product could help cut down all the trash we create and want to consume. As stated earlier, humans are known to overconsume all things energy, creating a vast amount of waste. Being more aware of the energy we are using can lead to great differences. While clean energy is still not widely as used, again, taking smaller steps can lead to getting to the bigger picture. With clean energy, it is mindful to be aware that we all have habits. And during a class I took in my freshman year related to philosophers and politics, we read a chapter that related to this dilemma. We are aware of the change we can bring, but as individuals, we can't change the world. So when we have the option to recycle or not, sometimes we choose not to do it solely because it's easier. But because we think of ourselves as one person who can't make a difference, us choosing not to recycle from time to time doesn't have a great effect. At least that's what our minds believe. Yet when a whole nation has this view, we are contributing to something on a rather large scale. By being aware of our overconsumption and harmful habits, we make room for clean energy to be present. One thing leads to another, creating a chain reaction and breaking the cycle. And the only way for affordable and clean energy to become more present in our life is if we make changes to our lifestyle. Lastly, goal 13 is climate action. It is defined as taking urgent action to combat climate change and its impact. If climate change continues at this rate it is going, it can bring natural disasters, health concerns, food shortages, and so on. And this one goes hand in hand with goal 7, as our goal is to help eliminate global warming by taking action. The main harm to our climate is the excess from carbon emissions released from natural gas and coal. Targeting the source can have the greatest impact. Wind energy, such as the wind turbines, compared to coal, has a significant difference in the amount of CO2 released, as coal's carbon footprint is 90 times larger than what it is produced from the wind turbines. And going back to previous SDGs, executing affordable and clean energy in those areas is combating climate change, whether it's through adding the solar energy on the top of a building, planting trees around the city, or watching what you buy. Clean energy protects the environment and leaves a greener world for future generations. So as we can see, affordable and clean energy can be linked with just about every SDG. It can have an impact on helping life in the water, creating quality education, and reducing poverty and hunger. And targeting areas with no access to any forms of energy or electricity can better their way of life while protecting their environment and their health. And it can also aid the places that do have access to be more sustainable.
Okay, so I'm going to be talking about the stakeholders. So when we first started considering what stakeholders related to SDGs, at first we had a hard time. I think we were just overthinking it because once we thought of one, we just kept thinking of a bunch of other ones that were affected by this SDG too. So these were just the main ones that we came up with. So I'm going to start with farmers. So as you can see on the bottom, there's a picture of cows on a farm and there's wind turbines in the background. And this is something that's actually happening a lot more often, specifically in more rural areas and in the Midwest. So pretty much wind developers are paying farmers to use their land to put these wind turbines on. And in turn for doing so, it gives the farmers a secondary source of a steady income, while at the same time they can still use their land for what they want, whether it's farming or whatever it is that they do. And then to put this into perspective of how much of a helpful impact this has economically, wind farms provide about $245 million every year in just lease payments to the farmers for hosting these wind turbines on their land. And then not only is this helping the environment, but it's also a major economic impact, and it helps out a lot of people. Like farming can be a very tough industry, especially with all the issues we're having with climate right now. So not only would we be fixing the issue with climate change and how hard it is to grow crops and stuff, but they're getting in income to make up for the lack that they're not getting when they can't grow crops. And then the second group of stakeholders is minorities. So we found research that not only Black Americans, but other minorities are at a way higher risk for higher utility fees, unsafe housing, unsafe, kind of how we touched on earlier, the unsafe cooking, and disconnection. So power being turned off, water being turned off, all of that type of stuff. And then also in comparison to white households, minorities see more often they have their power, just how I said, power cut off, and water, they have disconnections more often. And then they have disconnection notices more often. And then also these households are having to make sacrifices they're having to sacrifice other necessities to just pay for their power bills or energy related bills. And then there was even a study done in Ohio. While yes, they made it look like they cared about equality and they cared about all people equally, there's a huge disparity between minorities and white households when it comes to energy. And there was no one going out and addressing these problems, or they purposely were not going out and researching and gathering statistics, so it was easier for them to turn a blind eye to such a huge issue. And then the next stakeholder is businesses. So the shift to renewable energy is going to affect so many businesses, if not all, whether they be directly or indirectly related to the production of energy. And eventually companies that produce energy using fossil fuels, they're going to have to make a shift to renewable energy sources, because times are changing and there's a much higher demand for renewable energy. And if they don't make the switch, they'll probably fall behind, and other companies are going to start to compete and they're going to be using renewable energy sources. There are huge benefits for companies that do use renewable energy sources. So they'll obviously have lower power bills or energy bills. And then another one that I didn't think about, and I don't know why, was obviously using more renewable energy resources is more ethical, and therefore it gives you a public relations boost. And that's not why people should do it. They should do it because they genuinely care about the environment, but hopefully other people in the community will see and that will help their business out and hopefully be an attraction to their business. And then they're also contributing, like as someone like a business, you want like the job market to like do good. You want people to be employed. And so you're contributing to an increase in job opportunities kind of by like promoting this new, like an upcoming type of industry. You're helping create jobs. If you get solar panels installed on your house, you have, I don't know, wind turbines or whatever it is that they use for their business. And then less global warming emissions, because we know businesses, and how you said earlier, capitalism, like they produce a lot of greenhouse gases and use fossil fuels. And then it's also a major return on investment, which is also a big thing that business people like to, they're just big on that. So when you're going to make back what you put in to getting to having these sustainable resources for energy, it eventually will pay itself off, and you will end up saving less because you're not having to spend all this money on energy. You pay to have the solar panels installed once, and then after that, you don't have to keep making payments on things. And then animals. So obviously animals are not groups of people, but they're still living things that matter, and they're majorly affected by this topic. And so many animals suffer a lot due to our consumption of fossil fuels and non-renewable energy sources. And we're definitely starting to see the effects, and they're definitely getting worse rapidly. So for example, oil spills are a huge issue that we see like all the times in commercials. You see like the Dove commercials that like are trying to help animals. And then I have a picture at the top of a polar bear. And as we all know, because of global warming, the temperatures are rising and ice is melting, and they can't adapt to these warm temperatures, as well as other animals who need a very cold climate to live in, and they're starting to die, and they can't adapt. And it is difficult though, because I did find some research that it said, obviously there's going to be a negative side to everything, but some of the renewable energy sources that are starting to be used can actually harm animals. For example, like wind turbines, there was a study that found they killed a lot of birds and bats, and it was like interrupting their migration. Dams, a lot of times they can like stop fish from being able to go and breed, and it causes and also it interrupts their migration. And then also they're seeing like a premature death in a lot of fish, that they're not able to like go throughout the regular life cycle. And then another another like renewable energy source is solar plants that are also called power towers. And they produce like really strong beams of sunlight that literally incinerate insects and birds. So I guess like if you've ever used like a magnifying glass and like started a fire as like a science experiment when you were younger, like, I don't know if anyone's ever done that, but I did. And it literally like, it's like that, but on a whole nother level. It's burning living things. And then people with illnesses is also a major one. So, oops. Yeah, it says inadequate household energy has been linked to the following health outcomes for both adults and children. So cardiovascular, pulmonary, and respiratory illnesses, cancer, arthritis, and acute hospitalization, excess mortality in summer and winter, and anxiety, depression, and stress. So not only does this contribute to people who already have illnesses, like they could be born with such as asthma, but the lack of energy or safe energy also creates illnesses for people that they never were born with because of their unsafe living conditions or breathing in the air around them that's in their city, whatever it may be. And then lastly, I kind of spoke about this earlier too, was sub-Saharan Africa. So there's a major energy crisis there. And I know earlier I said, I think 759 million people in the world are without energy. or electricity. And out of those 759 million, 600 million of them live in sub-Saharan Africa. So that's a huge amount of people to be in one country and like in one area in comparison to how the other almost 200 million is dispersed throughout the rest of the world. And there are organizations that are trying to gain support and work towards making it a #1 priority of getting clean energy to that location.
Okay, next up, we're gonna talk about how affordable and clean energy relates to tourism. And this was a quote pulled from the SDG website about our goal. By promoting investments in clean energy sources, tourism can help reduce greenhouse gases, mitigate climate change, and contribute to access of energy for all. So tourism can be the leading factor of a country's economic growth. However, with tourism, there are consequences that affect the environment, and clean energy can help alleviate these issues. So how one person gets to another place is often by plane, especially when traveling to another country. And according to the Center for Climate and Energy Solutions in 2018, aircrafts were responsible for about 3% of total US carbon dioxide emissions and nearly 9% of greenhouse gas emissions from the US transportation sector. And commercial air travel accounted for most of the aircraft carbon dioxide emissions, with military and general aviation making up the rest. And with the recent pandemic, tourism was greatly affected as people couldn't travel. And now that the pandemic has seemed to be moving on, it is expected that the desire to travel will increase. So implementing sustainable flights could be the answer to help ensure a sustainable way of flying. Costa Rica has an airline called the Nature Air, which is a carbon neutral domestic airline. And while other places may not have them, there are steps tourists can take to be more energy efficient. This can range from packing lighter to flying like economy class. And also, if the places near you are walkable or bikeable, then you should offer that rather than getting in a car. And also, if you live in North Carolina, for example, and want to go to New York, you can try to find a train, because utilizing public transportation is beneficial. And while it still emits carbon emissions, according to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, railroads account for less than 0.6% of total US greenhouse gas emissions. And while changing the way tourists travel to places, the economy of these countries can also be affected. Like mentioned in some of the goals, affordable clean energy creates new jobs, and this can be more specific, creating energy jobs in the sector of tourism. Because of how badly tourism was hit during COVID, it is expected that the tourism industry won't fully recover until 2024. So creating new jobs in this sector can have huge benefits. And when thinking of like infrastructure and building hotels that are energy efficient, leaves the door open for these opportunities. And some countries have already created sustainable tourism housing by implementing solar energy and solar boilers. And at several islands, including Lapos Rios, they designed the rooms for guests to encourage natural airflow, cutting the need for air conditioning. And there's just so many small steps you can make in like an Airbnb or in a hotel that are more sustainable for tourists. And overall, the need for sustainable technology to be implemented in tourist destinations will help the economy grow and keep the environment safe. And like the safer, the better, will help gain more tourists. And lastly, the biggest critique of tourism is the impact it has on the environment. Numerous places around the world have felt the negative effects of tourism, as tourism strains local land use by leading to soil erosion and natural habitat loss. It increases pollution, it puts species in danger, and it even disrupts culture. So implementing affordable and clean energy can increase the chances of preserving their land. Firstly, it brings awareness to the issues surrounding these destinations. By making it known it has sustainable practices, those who visit could be more consciously aware of their actions and try to be more sustainable while they're on their trip. Secondly, it helps with the air pollution. When places that are overcrowded with those who live there and those that are visiting, the amount of air pollution being created harms the plants and animals that inhabit the area. And when looking at the specifics, when people travel to new places, the local food they consume is often a huge part of their experience. And wind and solar energy can help farmers' crops grow despite the issues of global temperatures increasing, and even cut down the cost those farmers spend on electricity. So while saving the environment of these places, it's also saving the culture that drives tourists in. And a majority of the places tourists visit are nature-based. So in order to ensure that they can keep going to these places, protecting the environment is one of the most important goals, because without the beautiful destination, there would be no tourism.
Okay, so how can tourism minimize these issues? So the tourism and hospitality industry relies on the use of a lot of energy and has even been described as a fossil fuel dependent industry. It's said that one night alone in a hotel produces about 30 kg of carbon dioxide, and the industry in Europe is the fourth major source of pollution. So maybe choosing a more sustainable place to stay while on your vacation is a good option. And I have a link here to, it was a website called Eco B&B, which is pretty much like Airbnb, but it's all like eco-friendlier places. So this was one that I found that I thought was really cool. It's in Cabo in Mexico. And if you scroll to the bottom, it shows here like all of the eco-sustainability services they provide. So I'll just read some of them, like organic or local food, how she was just saying that that's really important. Ecological cleaning products, waste recycling, energy saving lights, solar thermal panels for hot water, the list goes on. So I thought that that was really cool, and I definitely will be using that in the future. And that's a really good option. And then since the tourism industry is so huge, it affects so many different things. So once sustainable energy becomes more integrated into the industry, we will see a lot of positive impacts. And the tourism industry promotes a ton of chances for the use of less energy. So for example, like LED light bulbs and other energy efficient appliances like fridges, washers, dryers, cooking appliances. And then also offering incentives to guests who use less energy, which is another something I thought was really cool. And then updating operating procedures, and lastly, updating spaces so they're better equipped at preserving energy. So like better insulation, better heating, air, like cooling methods. And then we'll be seeing an increase in energy generated from solar, wind, hydropower, biomass, and geothermal energy sources. And then we'll also be seeing a lot more energy innovation. I think that this industry is becoming a lot more aware of like the effects that it's had on the environment. And so we're ready to like start reversing it. And also our generation is a lot more like conscious of the environment. And so I think like will help to create a demand that when we travel, I know I am definitely going to look for more sustainable options when I travel. So I think it'll create a demand, which will obviously create the supply for that. And then the UN did a good job of pretty much summing up everything I just said in whole. So they said, as a sector which is energy intensive, tourism can accelerate the shift towards increased renewable energy shares in the global energy mix. By promoting investments in clean energy sources, tourism can help reduce greenhouse gases, mitigate climate change, and contribute to access of energy for all.
So renewable energy sources were reported to be the cheapest back in 2020, even cheaper than fossil fuels. So why is this not being widely used? And this can be debated, but its underlying reason is that we are so dependent on fossil fuels. And there are various ways that we can, things that we can do to start like weaning ourselves off the dependency. Starting off with like just simple everyday tips, using efficient light bulbs, plugging appliances in a power strip, turning off something when not in use, and utilizing public transportation. On a larger scale, it'd be investing in wind, thermal, or solar energy, making it more accessible to everyone, creating energy efficient buildings, and also just like tree planting. And so how can we make and clean energy be made more affordable? And a great way to get people to use anything is through incentives. A great example we discovered were tax credit and federal assistance funds. By rewarding those with tax credits if they invested in renewable energy, it would greatly shift the focus to using clean energy and away from fossil fuels. And with federal assistance funds, the government can invest in energy efficient systems to bring the lower income families and overall bring more awareness to clean energy. And the main issue with clean energy isn't that it's super expensive, it's just that there's a lack of awareness and motivation to invest in it. While some places and individuals have already made the switch, it needs to gain momentum in order to uphold in our communities. And another way to make it more affordable and accessible is by involving the community. Projects are always taking place in large cities and small towns, so getting the community interested in creating something for them as a whole can also be an incentive. This can range from like making a recreational center run on solar power to even just a garden. And lastly, this graph shows the predictions for what countries will be using as their main source of energy. And as you can see, there's a great increase in renewable energy and it being the main source by 2050. And while coal will still be present, the fact that it might no longer be our main source is already a huge step, even if it's 30 years away.